Good morning. My name is Eric Tamby. I'm a solutions architect with CenturyLink. So I'm going to talk about high level who CenturyLink is. My slides don't have a lot of text, mostly pictures. So I'm going to keep it interesting. But my goal today is to show you the demo, show you how easy it is for you to spin services in a CenturyLink cloud. So I'm going to breeze through the deck pretty quickly as a solutions architect. I'm not a marketing guy. So I want you to take a look at the demo. Is the volume okay? They couldn't let me. Okay, great, excellent. So let's start with the security, because first thing people talk about it is cloud secure? So what I wanted to do was I wanted to combine security with humor, right? But let's talk about security in a deep dive. So we are a network company at the core. That's our core business. What that means to you is we can take a private connection from your data center into a cloud. That means all traffic is now secured. That's one way. You could do MPLS, you could do a layer 1 connection, layer 2 connection, a VPN. So many ways to get to the cloud, secure. Now within the cloud, there are ways to secure your workload. You can build 3-tier, 4-tier, multi-tier architecture and then have that secured by firewalling. So what I mean by that is when you create multiple tiers, each tier to the other tier talks to a firewall. So you're secured. Plus, if you have some kind of compliancy like PCI or other compliancy, you can encrypt your data, entire data. So not only the data is encrypted in transit, it's also encrypted at rest. So there are tools and various ways to encrypt it and make it really rock solid encryption. So if you have a compliancy, a security need, it will be able to suffice that. We're talking about compliancy. Customers ask me questions about, are you guys compliant? So our data centers are SSAE 16 compliant, SOC 2, and Type 2 compliant. One other thing about CenturyLink is the cloud that we have runs in our data center. It does not run a third-party data center. We have the ability to create all kinds of securities. Plus, we can all actually make a hybrid cloud. For example, you might have an application or a server that is older generation, legacy application, cannot be put on the cloud. You can put that in the co-location and create the interworking between that and the cloud. So that means some of the workload that doesn't require the compliancy, you could put that on the cloud, something that you can avail economies of scale, you can put that on the cloud, and the rest of the stuff you can put in your colo. So there are so many ways to create the cloud. So we are more like a custom cloud company. We're not off the shelf. We can create depending on the requirement you have, compliance needs, security needs, we can create the architecture for you. SLAs, so we have one of the most robust SLAs in the industry. So our cloud SLAs are 4 nines. Our network SLAs are less than 2 milliseconds on jitter, 4 nines again for availability. Within the data center, if you for example, I was talking about the colo to the cloud, within the data center we provide 100% SLAs. So if we have a compute and a storage in a work between the co-location and the cloud, it's 100% SLAs for network. High performance. So what I mean by that is we do business with usual suspects, HP, Dell, Cisco, Junipers. They're sitting on the top of the line gear. CenturyLink is a part of the 9 different acquisitions that are combined into one company. So a few years back, we had a company called Savvis that is now rolled into CenturyLink. Savvis had always did cloud since the 90s. Mid-90s, they've been doing a cloud. So we've done cloud for a very, very long time. The multi-tenant cloud is something I'm going to demo after this presentation. So high performance, you may have a need for really high performance or higher need. We can create a dedicated cloud for you, a bare metal cloud for you if you wanted to. Oh, I have this compliancy need. It cannot be in a multi-tenant for XYZ reasons, or have customers that are not comfortable putting on multi-tenant. We can create a dedicated box for you for that application. Moving on to support and services. So there are lots of cloud providers, and you might ask a question, how you guys are different? What makes you so special? What makes us special is when we have services, for example, security services, SOC services, for example, Security Operations Center, those are all CenturyLink employees, CenturyLink companies. And that is because of all the different mergers we have gone through for so many, 5 or 6 years last. So all of CenturyLink employees. So in other words, if you came to us and said, I want to do XYZ, we don't partner with a third-party company. It's our company, so it's one-stop shop for you. There's nobody to, bring 3 parties on the table. It's all one. we take care of everything for support and management services. Moving on to global footprint. So we talked about that. I think you saw that in slide 1. We have 58 data centers across the world. Our cloud data centers are about 13 data centers, and we're expanding. We're probably adding 2 or 3 more this year. So we're expanding. So what we're doing is the legacy data centers, or let's call it co-location data centers, we're converting them into cloud data centers also. So customers have the ability to create hybrid cloud or completely move applications from their co-location space into the cloud. Sorry about that. Tooling and automation, tooling and management. So what makes really cloud is the flexibility. How do you create the flexibility? You have to have the right tools. We will provide the right tools within the portal. So when you log in, there are things like you could do replication, you could do migration, DR, all built within an ecosystem. So you don't have to go get a third-party application to do that. Or if you have a need for migrating your application from your data center into our data center, you can do that. The tools available for you. API friendly. So this is a biggie one for a lot of customers. Can I do API? Command line people like myself, API, you can make the API calls version 1, version 2. If you want to do a deep dive demo, you can stop by the booth and I can show you a demo on the API also. Pay as you go. So this is the beauty with the cloud, right? You pay as you go. You don't have any long-term commits. So let me throw something interesting here. So we are going to roll out physical servers on an hourly model. This is a game changer, right? So in the traditional world, when we spec out a server, you would have to put it on a long-term contract for you. Now those things are gone. You can spin a physical server, your bare metal server, any application on that, on an hourly model. So if you have a short-term need for a project like big data, BI, something like that, you can put that on a server, use it as long as you want, remove your data, and the billing goes away. So all hourly model here. Of course, the multi-tenant cloud is all automatically hourly model here. Portability, so we give you the tools to port your workload from in to out. If you want to bring your workload from your data center into our data center, the tools available. You can take it back into the data center, the tools available for that. Tier 3 was one of the acquisitions we did in 2011. The CEO at that time of that company is one of the founders of Iron Foundry. So we are very much plugged into the developer world also in terms of that. So if you want to check out the CenturyLink labs, there's lots of tools available, virtual cafe there, learn about the new technologies coming in, what are the developers are looking for. That's one thing to check out, CenturyLinkLabs.com. Tools for automation, I talked about high level, the automation tools built within the portal without having to add a third-party tool to that. So for example, you might want to have an application for a developer that works maybe 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. You can schedule that the VM to come up at 8 o'clock in the morning and go off at 5 o'clock. So you can control your cost and have that available. So you can automate the process. That's one example. There are several different examples you can automate that. You can automate security features. You can create blueprints. For example, you have a multi-stack design. You can create a blueprint for that, have that available in the library and spin it in one click. Self-service model, so all the tools we provide you all self-service in the portal. You can add do it for me services, or we can come and bring our engineers to do it for you. So let's move into the demo part. So this is the landing page. This is the web-based tool. You can see that SSL encrypted here. I'm just going to log in. So this is my landing page. As you can see the landing page, all the information you need to see in snapshot, you have that. At a C-level, this is very critical. So a C-level person walks in and he asks me, what are we spending in the cloud? At a glance, you would know exactly what you're spending. Where your servers are located, what countries they're located in one snapshot. What your hourly cost right now is $2.06 and so on and so forth. So that is an estimate and that's a month to date. So the difference is, if I shut off some of the services, the estimate might go down. If I ran that 24/7 as is, then my estimate would be $17.50. So gets an example. So that's why you see the difference between the month-to-date cost and the monthly estimate, because I could shut down services and my billing goes away. So on our, some of the collateral we have in our booth, you notice that there are 12. Actually, we added the 13th data center. Singapore was the latest data center we added, and you can see that in the 5th last one. And so you have the ability to spin your workload anywhere you want, global, right? So what that brings is, think about this way. You can have a geo-diverse workload. You can have workload sitting on the East Coast, another copy of that on the West Coast. For example, you have an e-commerce server. You want 100% uptime. That's a great example. You have the stack running on the East or the West. Or maybe you have customers in Asia Pac or Europe. Have that stack running closer to your customers. So you get a better performance, a better customer experience. Let's moving on down here. So one of the great things is the governance. In a lot of IT shops I've seen, governance is absent, right? It's not there. This is a great way. It will tell me exactly what happened on the machine, at what time, and who made the change. And this governance you can download, you can import that into whatever tool you have. This is a report. This is saved up to last 1 year. So you can go back and up to 1 year within the portal, or you can create an API, pull that information within your own system to do some analysis on that. Find out. This is a great way. So governance is critical for compliance reasons, for security purposes, and things like that. So let's take a look at what are the tools available. So you can see here, as I click here, all the tools that you need to spin a data center are available at your fingertips. In other words, creating a server, creating a VPN, firewalling your workload, creating a storage elements, scripting, blueprinting I talked about, right? Maybe you have a project for big data, Hadoop, Cloudera is available. You can spin that blueprint, or you can create your own blueprints. I talked about like a multi-tier design. You can create a multi-tier design and place that in your library. So next time when you need to spin that blueprint, simply one click and off you go. So let me give you an example. What that means is, let's say you have a 3-tier design, web app, and a database, and each of the tier needs a lot of scripting. So you can have not only those 3 tiers, have scripts attached to those individual tiers, and have multiple different VMs running at each tier. Create a blueprint of entire stack and have that available in the library. I give it a use case example for that. A customer in Boston, and they are a SaaS provider. Anytime a customer, they sign up a customer, they have this multi-tier stack they need to spin for each customer. So what they have done is they've created a blueprint now within the library. Next time they sign up for one of those large customers, they simply spin that blueprint dedicated to that customer. So they don't have to go through it. It takes them 8 to 12 hours to set up the whole environment. Now with the blueprint, they have one click and off they go. The entire stack is running. So completely offhand. So let me show you some of the other features. So let's talk about, how do you create a server, which is, number one thing. A server page, you can see that is really simple. Single page wizard, and you can create a server. I have the ability to select my data center right here. You can pick my data center anywhere I want. Yeah. Once I select that, let's select here New York. I can select a group. Here's my group come in. So think about the group. You can use the groups for organizing your workload for, let's say, by department, by business unit, by function. Could be sales, marketing, HR, and so on and so forth. And once you have that, then you can create security envelope around that group. So I'm going to pick my hyperscale instances as my group, and you can name it anything you want here. So this somebody named as hyperscale here, and 2 ways you can do that. So now here, we'll be offering managed services here. So in other words, you might say, okay, I don't want to do the updates and patching. I want you to do that for me. We could do it for you. Because those are mundane things. You don't want to do that on a daily basis. Let somebody else handle that. Maintain your data. Run your data on the cloud. So we'll be offering that. In Sterling and in Santa Clara, that's available today. Server type, majority of the workload that I've seen sits on the standard server. On the standard server, we get 2,500 IOPS or up to 20,000 IOPS. So starting at 25 up to 20,000 IOPS. On hyperscale servers, they start at 15,000 IOPS and goes up from that. So why would you use a hyperscale server? For example, you have a NoSQL, Hadoop, something like that during fast data, BI, you want to put that on a hyperscale server for better performance. Scrolling down, see Untitled. So Untitled is a feature from VMware. So by the way, so one of the things I forgot to mention is our platform runs on VMware, version 5. What that means is you have all the tools, feature, functionality within the VMware platform. It's built within the portal. Not only that, we've added other tools, proprietary tools within the portal to enhance that experience for you. So Anti-Affinity is one of those tools, if you recall from VMware, where the VM is really not attached to the physical device. It has the ability to be like a floater, right? It's not really, so if the physical server fails, your VM is still living. It will be living on adjacent or within the same cluster. So it runs within the cluster, not attached to the physical server. Moving down here, so I'm going to go ahead and pick my operating system. You can see the various choices of the OS here. All the Windows, usual suspects, Linux versions, various different Linux versions here. Some of these versions, obviously you can see that Red Hat, Windows, we can manage it for you. Well, I talked about updates patching, we can do that for you. I'm going to pick the most popular here. Let's pick Windows 2008 here. I could give it a server name here, web. Notice when I'm building a server, notice that it tells me exactly what it's going to cost. There is no secret here. We are completely open in terms of pricing. You exactly know what your price is. I give it a description. I'll call it a web server. So now I have the ability to assign a password, or I can have a system generate one. I'll have the system generate a password for me, and but the password will come in an email to me. Here are the resources here. So this is the beauty. You've seen a lot of different providers. This is one of our differentiators, right? We don't try to tunnel you into a t-shirt size VM. In other words, you have the ability to create the server and assign whatever resources you want. It doesn't have to be a small, medium, large, extra large, right? Like I talked about t-shirt size. You have the ability to create, maybe I want to have a 2 CPU server. Okay, and maybe I want to have more resources. Maybe I want to do this 16. I can just type it in. It's 16 server. So I can pick and choose in single units of CPU and single units of memory. And then you can see my cost. So as I adjust these numbers, so let's make it realistic. 2x4 is mostly sufficient for running an AD server, for example, right? So 2x4, $139, you know exactly what your cost is. And based on that, you might have a budget. This will help you to be around that budget, right? Without having to go over the budget, you know exactly what your cost is. And there are tools within the platform that, for example, you can create, I talked about the subgroups. You can limit the resources. So let's say you have an intern, or let's say marketing. You don't want the marketing to go crazy on the server. You can limit what they can spin within the cloud. So there's a lot of different tools available to you to restrict and automate the process. Here, storage. I'm going to give it a drive letter. I call it Z. Give it 100 gig, and there you go. You can see my price automatically adjust. As I add as I adjust my resources, notice that if I change this, again my price will change. So it's very upfront, completely transparent. You know exactly what your cost is. You know exactly what you're doing here. It's very, very simple to spin a server. I go down here, excuse me. I go down here, and here I can select my network. Remember I talked about the security envelopes? So now this is a way I can create multi-tier design and have those VMs running on its right security groups. So these are same thing as security group. Different providers will use different terminologies. VLAN, subnet, security group. It's various different functions to create securities within your architecture. I create hyperscale here. I provide my DNS name here. And I can also define my time to live. For example, if I'm doing a test and dev, I don't want the server running forever. This happens all the time in the IT department. Server they had a project running in 2010, and this server is still running. We don't need that, right? So here you can define your time to live. And if you have a need, the system will send you an email 24 hours prior that your VM will be deleted. At that time, you can go take an action, whether you want to extend that or let it go and delete it. So that means you can control your cost and don't have that spinning forever. And at the bottom here, if I click on create server, it'll create a server. So depending on the OS type, Linux will take you about 4 to 5 minutes, or Windows will take about 6 to 7 minutes because of different kind of load set here. And I click it, and off they go. Now, how do I get into my server, right? The question. So what happens is once the server is spun, let me go ahead and do that actually. Once the server is spun, I'll get an email with the password and an IP address of the server. Now, when you spin a server within our platform, by default, it's coming with a private IP address because we encourage our customers to not have a public IP address unless you need to. You want to create a VPN tunnel from your site into the data center, right? And then access that VM. Because, you know, very little workload is really public facing. Maybe websites and stuff like that. But the other workload that you have is internal, your database server. You never have to have a public IP address. You never want to assign a public IP address because it's a security situation, right? So that's why it comes up with a private IP address. Once you have your site-to-site VPN tunnel built from your data center into a cloud, you can access that as an RDP into that. Because you get a password, go to the IP address, private IP address, with the virtue of the tunnel, you get into the server, and you can manage the server. The same thing with your Linux servers and Windows server. Okay, so CPU, it says CPU exceeded. So within this security group, or within this folder, there was secured, somebody has put a limitation on that I cannot spin a server beyond the CPU limit. So this is, I wanted to demo that. Remember I talked about earlier, you can limit and control that an intern or a marketing person doesn't go spin a server that they don't have a need for. If you just have a simple website for Linux, you don't want to have a 16 CPUs running on it, right? So this is a way to limit the server. But let me go into the dashboard and show you the server that are running. Let's go into Canada. So within Canada, you notice that different folders, or let's call it server groups. So I talked about server groups. What are server groups? It's a way to organize your workload and way to control your workload. So and have that organized by function or a company name or maybe by department. And one other thing, notice that when I place my cursor on Canada, it tells me exactly what my cost is for all the workload that's running in Canada, right? And if I scroll down here into one of the work groups here, let's go into development servers, I know my cost for that server. This is a great way for the C-level person to know. A CIO walks into the room and says, what are we paying for that group in Canada? Here's the cost for that. In real time, you know exactly what your cost is. No hidden secret here, right? And within that group, notice I have two servers running here. Now, let me show you something very interesting. This is something unique with us, is I have the ability to pause all the servers within that group. I have the ability to reboot the servers, power up the servers. Maybe that group, let's say this is a developer servers group. Servers are gone, it's a weekend, I can go shut down those servers here. So my billing stops. So you can control, you don't have to go individual servers. Imagine if this was 100 VMs, you wouldn't want to go 100 times stopping the servers. You can do that at the group level here and have that. So you can do power off, reset, and going here, I can set up horizontal auto scaling. I can do scheduling a task. For example, I can have a pause or a stop. I talked about earlier where you don't want that VM running maybe beyond the working hours for developers. You can control that and you'll be able to see your tasks here. Let's go back into the settings, into the group here. So one other thing I want to talk about that is some of the, going to one of the VMs. Some of the providers, what they do is when you go and spin a VM, you are basically in that VM, right? You don't have the ability to move your workload from the, let's say, small into a large. The only way you can do that is you have to migrate the application into a large server and then do it. That's ludicrous. You don't want to do that. What if I can just increase the amount of resources? Maybe I have an application that needs more cores. I simply go and edit it on the fly, and I can change it to 2 CPUs and apply, and I'm done. No rebooting of the server, no downtime. I can do same thing with the memory, and I can do same thing with the storage. So I get the same error because of that. Okay, so I can do the same thing with the storage. Here I can do here with the same thing with the memory, and I can go add more storage here without having to disturb the VM. It's a great tool. This is a great feature because you don't want to migrate your application running on a single VM to another one. It's a great way to do that. Now, another thing you can do that is if you wanted to automate the process, you can automate this process. You can say auto scaling, vertical auto scaling. For example, let's say you have a server running you expect a lot of traffic coming from the internet. You can set up auto scaling. So let's say holiday season, you're trying to sell a widget. You can set up auto scaling for that CPU cycles to be added. So add another CPU, add another CPU. As your traffic grows, you can do that. You can do the same thing with the memory. And you can set the parameters. For example, you can set parameters, for example, if the memory goes over 90% for the 5 minutes, I want you to go ahead and add another gig to that. and it will go automatically add another gig to that. So let me show you that in the policies here. That is a great feature. And you can do the same thing with the cooldown. For example, now that let's say it's 3 o'clock in the morning, traffic has gone down, you can send a cooldown period so that CPU, you don't need 4 CPUs. You can run that with 1 CPU. Automatically, system will release those CPUs back to CenturyLink. Your cost goes down. So you can control so many ways you can control your cost. So here's the policies I was talking about. You can see right here, I have a policy here that says CPU goes over 90% for 15 minutes. Send me an email, or I can have that vertical auto scaling where I can say add another CPU. I can take a manual action, or I can automate the process to system to add the CPU resources automatically to that. Here's a number of CPUs. For example, in the database server, I have a policy running says 1 to 4 CPUs usage based. So I can go, it will go ahead and add CPU one at a time as the need is going to add one at a time, and so on and so forth. So you control your cost that way. Let's go into something very interesting. Okay, so let's talk about sub accounts. Sub account is a really great way to create really organization of your work. For example, let's say you might have customers, or you may have a need to resell your service. Let's say you're a SaaS developer. You can develop sub-accounts for each customer. For example, here I have Acme running. So I go simply into my drop-down, and notice that I can change that to the Acme, and notice all my colors and logos will change. So you have the ability to not only sub-accounts, white label it. You can white label and resell it. Let's say you develop this cool software that you can sell. You could put that on a sub-account and let the customer spin it. White label it, we bill you, you bill your customer. Add services to that, you bill us. So this is another proposition to maybe if you have a business model you wanted to follow, you could do that too. Or it could be a chargeback within the department. It could be a showback, depending on the business model you have. So I've said a lot of things. I'm sure there are some questions. I can take questions if you have any. Sure. So 2 options. When you spin an unmanaged VM, you manage it. You want to spin a managed VM. Remember there was a checkbox when I was spinning that? You check that box and it will manage that for you. Red Hat, Windows. Yes, ma'am. So the question was, can I schedule the VMs to go offline and come back online? You can do that manually, or you can automate the process. Like I talked about developers, there's a good use case for that. You don't want that servers running 24/7. You can have that scheduled for other purposes also. Maybe you don't want that workload running all the time, so you can control your cost. Sir? Absolutely. Let me go switch back to the green color. So firewalling, right? Earlier, remember I talked about we're a custom cloud company. You can use a multi-tenant firewall, and you may have a need for, I want to have my own firewall. We can take a Juniper checkpoint, place that dedicated firewall in our cage, and then make it an OPEX model for you. So you never have to go to the cage to do anything. So we can take some of the older gear and put it in our cage. No colo. Or you can do that with, let's say, F5 is another example, load balancers or VPN concentrators, you can do that. Now, we also have within a platform, within an ecosystem, that is, we have a virtual firewall that you can place that within the perimeter and do your VPNing, your firewalling, your application development controllers, or your load balancers, all in one. So place that on one of the VLANs. Remember we talked about security groups? Place that on a security group and then have your application stack running below that. So you've secured the perimeter and you have your stack running below that. Questions? Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. John, could you repeat that? So depending on which one we're seeing more. So for business customers, I've seen mostly Microsoft. Okay, but the newer developers are wanting Linux. All on the Linux platform. Open source, has been very, very popular lately, a lot. I might see that it could be, it could tip on the other side. We don't know yet, depending on the applications. But with the Linux says there's so many different various Linux version. There's not one, right? And it's just, you can customize it to your taste, and then create another Linux version. Thousands of Linux version out there. We support one of the most popular ones. I mean, if you have a Linux version that is customized, that you want to run, put it on a bare metal from us. It doesn't have, if it is not in the catalog, we can put it on a bare metal for you. Yes, ma'am. So within, yeah, one other thing, I'm glad you mentioned that. So when I spun a server, it had the two types of storage, the standard and the premium storage. What that means is we are taking snapshot of a VM, one snapshot for 1 day for the last 5 days, the standard. If you wanted extended one, we can do a 14-day snapshot, one snapshot a day for the last 14 days. So that's a snapshot of a VM. What's the use case for that? So for example, let's say your admin did a patching last night and the server is not booting now. You can call us, we can revert to the patch, the previous day's patch, or whichever patch you prefer, or whichever snapshot you prefer, we can revert to that snapshot and your server will be up and running. That's one way. The other way, if you have a longer retention, we can add the data protect backup, which is another product. We'll have a longer term retention. We can custom that for you, whatever retention policy might be. So yeah, so that's what I talked about earlier. If you have a need for 100% uptime and you want to have that, up to the point, to the minute, you want to create 2 stacks for redundancy, HA. Very simple. It's the same concept that you do today, right? For example, you have a provider for network. You have another provider for network, for redundancy. So you want to create multiple stacks. If you have an application that needs that granularity, then you probably want to do that. You want to set up. Yes. So one of the acquisitions we did was Data Gardens. Data Gardens has a tool called Safe Haven that keeps your VMs up to date to the minute. And you can set up checkpoints as low as 30 seconds within the 2 VMs. So you have the replicated copy running on 2 different geographies in the same data center, one in your data center, one in our data center. Whatever you prefer. So many ways to customize that. I think that's my time. Any last questions? Okay, thank you very much.